Hi, I'm Daniel, and Iron Man 2 was my childhood MCU movie. I am so sorry if that made you feel old. It's got its critics, but the movie is filled with lots of awesome moments. I mean, that suitcase suit-up scene doesn't get old. Well, apart from the actual age of the movie, I'm sorry! So, let's take a quick look at the video game adaptation, shall we? You know, maybe one of these days I'll stop giving myself false hope about the quality of video game adaptations from this era. But today is not that day. This is Iron Man 2, the video game, developed by High Voltage Software for the Nintendo Wii, the correct platform for ultimate Gen Z nostalgia and jankiness. Now, you see how the game's title includes the words Iron Man 2? Well, I did, but it seems the writers didn't. Yeah, apart from the characters and some concepts from the movie which feature in this game, it's a completely different, brand new story. Now, I'm sure there are valid reasons for this. They probably weren't made privy to information about the movie itself. But damn, it's a bold move not to adapt the story in the slightest for what is essentially a kid's video game. Ah, right, that makes sense. And for the adults who played this back in the day, you made your choice. Well, let's actually get into it. And why don't we jump into that all-new story they've built for us here? Well, I won't do a full in-depth walkthrough of every moment of gameplay and story because it's not super interesting, but I will go through the dot points of the story through this video. We start with Tony recording something. The Wikipedia page says it's a journal entry, but I thought it was some public statement. Either way, the game doesn't tell us. Anyways, he's reflecting on his announcement where he revealed himself as Iron Man and his struggle on trying to figure out solutions on saving the world.
I'll tell you what it is. It's like every time I start to get my head around something really beneficial to mankind, some genius shows up with an army of killer robots or some other ridiculous scheme for world dominance, and I have to drop everything and knock heads together.
That's some foreshadowing.
Roxxon.
Tony also comments on Roxxon, a rival company who is attempting to create an army of unmanned Iron Men, and this is about the closest the game ever gets to the movie story. Anyways, Rhodey chimes in and tells us there's something up at the Stark archives, and we go to learn about how to blast people away, aka the tutorial. You get 3 types of attacks: primary, secondary, and melee. I never really found the melee attack too useful because the primary attack would work well enough anyways. You can also lock on to enemies with the Z button, which worked mostly fine, although it would sometimes just be a little finicky when there were multiple enemies on screen. Your primary attack starts off with just your basic one-handed repulsor, and you're given an array of secondary weapons. You can purchase, upgrade, and choose different weapons, which we'll get back to in a second. Your repulsors are dependent on your energy meter, although they really don't use much energy, and each secondary weapon carries its own ammo meter. Both these meters regenerate pretty quickly, which meant whenever I needed successive heavier secondary attacks, I would just sort of cycle through each secondary weapon as the previous ones were regenerating, and I always had enough ammo to shoot something. Now, apart from one specific level later in the game, nothing is really too difficult, and you can mostly brute force your way by just spamming attacks. Usually your primary attack for smaller enemies and secondary attacks for larger enemies, or in some cases you can just straight up skip hordes of enemies without a problem. There's actually quite the selection of weapons that you can purchase, as you can see from the weirdly detailed manual. Not complaining. Now, I never claimed this to be an in-depth review, however, because the game sort of just drops the upgrade menu on you without much fanfare. Would you like to upgrade? Sure. And because I felt that I was making my way through the game just fine with whatever the game gives you by default, I didn't spend much time on buying upgrades or other weapons. Which, this is a great time to talk about the level structure in this game. So the game is broken up into many distinct levels, which are categorized by location. Before starting each level, you can choose to play between one of the many Iron Man skins or War Machine. Yep, most levels allow you to pick either character, and some are made specifically for one of them. Now, you can upgrade your character in between levels. Iron Man and War Machine both have separate upgrade options, and upgrades are worth a certain number of tech points. You receive tech points by finding tech trophies, which are hidden in levels, although I'm not sure how much each trophy is worth. Now, in the 5 or so hours it took to finish the game, I paid attention to the upgrades only once when I realized I hadn't touched the system at all, and now watching back over the footage, it turns out that I did buy some more weapons, although I never ended up equipping them. Which, yep, before each level you can choose your loadout. Although in the interest of getting through this as fast as possible, I always chose the convenient auto-equip option. No idea what criteria it used to pick which weapons, but it worked well enough for me. So, how does it feel to play this game? It's Iron Man. It should feel awesome to fly through levels like nothing can stop you. Well, if you've been paying attention to the clips in the background, you might have noticed that there's been zero flying so far. That's right, apart from a few selected levels, you can't fly through missions. All you get is the ability to hover around the level or just jog around. And jogging around seriously feels super slow and unsatisfying. Why are we running around like this? I don't remember the bit in the movie where he runs around. Why aren't we allowed to fly? This is so slow. Now, there are a few combat situations where hovering will allow you to avoid the reach of enemies while raining down attacks, although it mostly feels like hovering is here to allow you to reach higher parts of the map. So yeah, movement in this game plays a pretty significant role in how generally unsatisfying this game feels. And add the fact that the camera is controlled by pointing your Wii remote around, which would often get stuck on the edge of the screen for some reason, and it creates an unfortunate mess. I should mention, however, that compared to the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of the game, which do include flying, the levels in this version probably wouldn't be able to accommodate flying very well because the environments are smaller and quite tight. But my point about the unsatisfying movement in general still stands. As mentioned, a few of the levels are specifically flying missions, where you have to handle flying enemies, and the rest are your pretty standard affair. Lots of shooting enemies, completing simple sub-objectives, and the occasional boss battle thrown in there. A common occurrence in these levels are control panels, which you need to hack to proceed. They all involve the same simple puzzle featuring a grid of hexagons. Selecting a hexagon lets you see which sides of it are lit up, and each side of every hexagon must be lit up by either itself or an adjacent lit up side of another hexagon. Of course, this is all ignoring that little option at the bottom called autocomplete, which does exactly what it sounds like. Why is there just a button?
Take it down.
What? Like there's a button to autocomplete it. Why? I only used this feature late in my playthrough, but as far as I can tell, there is zero consequence for just letting the game automatically complete these puzzles for you. It baffles me that they would just include this for seemingly no reason. And hey, it seems that Tony has the ultimate superpower of immortality in this game. Well, almost. When you die as Tony, you get to play a little minigame to revive yourself because the arc reactor has magical powers apparently. Basically, you can rotate these 3 rings with these tracers on them, and the goal is to create a complete path that goes into the center of the reactor. If the orb hits a dead end, Tony actually dies. If you're playing as War Machine, well, get good, I guess. And again, as far as I could tell, there was no limit to how many times you could revive yourself in a level with this minigame. Alright, so that's the gameplay sorted. Now let's very quickly tackle this story, shall we? Hey, I'm Storytelling Guy. Or more accurately, just me in a wacky outfit. I wanted to do something funny for this section, but I couldn't think of anything interesting. So here we are. Time for the story. Okay, so back to the Stark Archive attacks. Turns out Roxxon, who are behind this attack, bought out Hammer Industries and their army of unmanned drones, and they've managed to steal Jarvis's code. The gang theorized that this attack was led by General Shatilov, the Russian president and a rogue general in charge of the Tesla energy program for the Russian military. And by pure coincidence, Nick Fury lets us know that they're responding to a separatist attack, who are currently seizing control of Russia's Tesla facility. So off we go to assist S.H.I.E.L.D. with this task and save civilians. And yeah, don't you just love how beautiful these cutscenes look? We defeat the Roxxon armature and locate where it's being remotely powered from. The facility is run by AIM, led by Dr. Dewitt, who is masterminding this whole operation. They're building Shatilov an armored suit called the Crimson Dynamo, using the stolen Jarvis code, although DeWitt berates Shatilov for bringing us and S.H.I.E.L.D. to their front door. And speaking of S.H.I.E.L.D., they've already placed Natasha Romanoff to spy at the facility, though it looks like she's been compromised. Once there, we save Natasha, who helps us navigate through the facility, which leads us straight to the Crimson Dynamo battle, which for all his effort in this massive operation, gets destroyed with a few missiles. Turns out this DeWitt guy was once hired by Stark Industries before being fired by Tony for working on a questionable project called Protean. Very conveniently, Protean is a project which magically regenerates whatever it's built for. And from there, we're off to Budapest, where Pepper is attending a conference, and coincidentally, there happens to be some AIM activity. And wouldn't you know, they're casually just holding the city of Budapest hostage. We resolve this, and surprise, surprise, Pepper gets into trouble. Quickly save Pepper, defuse a few bombs, and we have a quick skirmish with Jack Taggart, aka Firepower, which finishes our spell in Budapest. Using Protean, DeWitt manages to merge himself with the big metal suit and becomes Ultimo.
Let there be light.
Sir, Dr. DeWitt, can you hear me? Are you all right?
Alright then. Anyways, the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier is under attack, and we're there to save the day. A quick boss battle with Mauler later, and we turn to War Machine, who is stopping a massive armiger from getting to the helicarrier. And just a quick break from our storytelling to talk about this annoying level. Essentially, while you're trying to get at the armiger, you're bombarded by these kamikaze drones. I have zero idea what actually prompts them to home in and attack you, but there's almost no warning, and sometimes they would just immediately swoop in before you would have a realistic chance to react. Now, two things. Naturally, I thought that you could get out of the way when they were homing in on you, but nope, you just have to hope that you can get some repulsor shots in before they decide to attack you. And secondly, I thought that you had to make your way closer to the armiger to start attacking, but you don't. Add on multiple drones at the same time and missiles from the armiger, and this level of the game becomes infuriatingly unbalanced, though maybe it shouldn't have taken me as many tries as I took. But precision. Ow! Please, 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 please. Thank God. We identify an AIM base in Malaysia, which we theorize would be the perfect location for AIM to repurpose a stolen Stark technology called Green Grid, which transfers electric power through clouds or something like that. I don't know, I never said I was a reliable narrator. The only notable bit is a boss battle with Ghost, and this section is done. And from here, we've reached the final section of the game, where we battle Ultimo by luring him back to the Stark archives to end where we began. Classic storytelling. Tony finds a way inside Ultimo, and Rhodey is left to destroy the arc reactors on the outside. This one's a tedious level where you can only slowly get progress on the arc reactors, because it's the only time in the game where you have to balance your energy meter between hovering and shooting the infinitely spawning enemies and regenerating turrets with your repulsors. And for the very final task in this game, we make our way inside Ultimo, hacking terminals and finally uploading the anti-Protean virus. No, seriously, that's the final mission. No big final Ultimo boss battle, we just skip to his destruction. And there you have it, Iron Man 2 for the Nintendo Wii. Now, I know I called the story uninteresting earlier, and to be honest, it just didn't excite me while playing the game. But looking back on it, it's not horrible. I think the non-seamless broken up level structure, static cutscenes, and the unsatisfying ending are working against the story here. Though the inclusion of a range of different Iron Man characters from the comics is a definite highlight, and it's not too surprising considering the story was written by Matt Fraction, who has written a bunch of Marvel comics. Now, let's be real, we're not expecting some game-changing gameplay here, but it's very stock standard. It's an oft boring experience where you're really going through the motions for a lot of the game, and in the few situations where the game tries to provide a unique experience for the player, the gameplay either ends up with unclear instructions or unbalanced moments. And those two unbalanced boss battles I highlighted in the story, in addition to the completely sterile ending section of the game, really makes the production feel more and more rushed the more you went into the game. All we can hope is that the kids who played this back in the day had fun with it, and the adults who bought it for their children or themselves learn about Metacritic. Just kidding.